Today we come to the final message in our series, I See a Church. I See a Church. And today we want to talk on the subject, all on the line. Honoring the past, but open to the future. Quite fitting for this month, because outside of the church there is an emphasis on the past. And so we are honoring the past, but we want to be open to the future. Many years ago, I attended a conference. The lead speaker was Dr. Crawford Loritz, who at the time was a director with Campus Crusade for Christ. He is now pastor of Fellowship Church in Georgia and the speaker on the program Legacy. But he made a statement, and he said that we in the church must be careful that we honor tradition without becoming traditionalist. Because a traditionalist tends to fossilize. And we're unable to move forward because we're so crustified on the past. And so we want to honor the past, but we want to be open to the future. Church is a unique place because in the church we tend to want to hold on to traditions. The rest of our lives may move forward. We've got the latest phone, the latest smart TV, the latest home security system, the latest car off Detroit's lot. And so everything outside of church we embrace, but when it comes to church, we are steadfastly committed to holding on to the past. And so today I want to challenge our thinking. I want to challenge us as to whether or not we can honor the past while being open to the future. The text that was read in your hearing, I want to walk you through that as a setup to our main point for today. Verse 8, 2 Kings chapter 6 says this, Now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. Aram is also synonymous, or the name change can be Syria. And so you've got Syria, Aram, and there was always war with Israel. We know that if you read the text of Scripture, particularly the Old Testament, there were many, many, many wars. There was the taking of territory and the giving back of territory, or not giving back, but the seceding of territory as it was being taken. And one nation would invade a nation and take them captive, and that nation finally would break free, and they would then be able to go and capture another nation. So there was always this war going on, but between Aram and Israel, they were at war. After conferring with his officers, he said, this is the king of Aram, I will set up my camp in such and such a place. I want you to walk with me now. These armies are moving from place to place. And he wants to set up a camp. And so verse 9 says, the man of God then sent word to Israel. I want you to notice, it jumps from the king of Aram setting up or desiring to set up a camp in such and such a place. It jumps to the man of God with no explanation in between, sending word to the king of Israel, saying, beware of passing that place. What place? The place that the king of Aram is about to set up camp. Because the Arameans are going down there. He's like a scout giving advance notice. I want you to be aware that the king of Aram, the king of Syria, is about to go down and set up camp in a what? In a certain place. And so the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. So much in that the king was willing to listen to the man of God. The king had such respect for the man of God that if the man of God spoke, he was willing to listen. And the text says, time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. Here's what I want you to notice. I want you to notice not only did he know where he was, but he got there ahead of the Syrians. He got there first. So that by the time the Syrians were there, came in, Israel was already there and on guard, protecting the place. This enraged the king of Aram, verse 11. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, tell me, which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? What he's basically saying is, who's the snitch? It's an eloquent way of saying, who's the mole? Who in our camp is not with us, but actually with Israel? None of us, my lord king, said one of his officers. Now I want you to track with me. He says this, he says, but Elisha, the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Now you got to wrap your head around this. He says, at night when you're whispering to your wife, the prophet knows what you're saying. Now, we can get into a lot of speculation here, but I'm going to stick with the text. The text says that when you are talking to your wife pillow talk, the prophet knows what you're saying, and he's able then to tell what's going on. See, sometime when the man of God speaks into your life, you've got to understand that God has given the word. See, that's the only way that the prophet could get the word. The prophet wasn't in his bedroom. The prophet wasn't in his house. But God divinely inspired the prophet, that the prophet knew what was being said, and the prophet knew where to send the king of Israel. I think sometimes we forget that God appoints and sets up his prophet. God allows his servants to carry his message. And so he gets mad. I would be mad too. This man, see, he's dropping on all of my private conversations. Go find where he is so I can send men and capture him. The report came back, he is in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and they surrounded the city. Again, follow me. The city is surrounded. Armies today do it. They call it siege. They surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Can you imagine him getting up and sun comes up and he looks off into the distance, and around the city there are horses. They're ringing the city with all these soldiers sitting there waiting to come and attack the city, maybe like a scene out of Braveheart. The servant says, "Oh no, my Lord." Feel it, feel the emotion. "Oh no, my Lord, what shall we do?" the servant asks. "We're surrounded. They're going to slaughter us." The prophet of God stands up and he says to his servant, "Son, don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Again, you've got to understand now, this guy comes out, it's just him, the prophet, and some lowly people hanging around. And the prophet says, listen, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And I can imagine the servant putting that look on his face, that quizzical look, and saying, dude, have you just lost your mind? There's no one here but you and I. What do you mean there's more of us than there are of them? That's impossible. And here is what the prophet then prayed. He prays to God. He says, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. You know, we are sometimes given a vision by the man of God, and we can't see it. Much conflict and resistance within the church comes when the head of the house gives a vision and you can't see it. And when you can't see it, it seems foolish, and you begin to fight against it, and you call up your buddy on the phone and say, did you just hear that nonsense pastor running on with down there at the church house? That can never happen. That won't get that. Why? It's because you are then blinded to the vision that God has given. And it's incumbent on the leader to say, God, open their eyes that they may see. And that's what the prophet does. The prophet says, Lord, open his eyes so he can see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Then he was able to get on board because now he could see. I think we need to be aware that often it's not because the person is just inherently wicked or evil. They just can't see. So if you ever find yourself in one of those awkward positions where the leadership of the church comes and they says we're moving in this direction, and you're sitting there scratching your head going, that makes no sense. Maybe, just maybe, your next prayer ought to be, God, open my eyes that I may see. That's what we see here. There are times that we may feel just as lost as the servant, just as confused as the servant. It seems that danger is everywhere around us. For when the army of Syria was breathing down on them, death was in the air. And that servant's reaction, his first reaction is, oh no, my Lord, what shall we do? He was able to see in the supernatural what God was up to. Today we face a similar scenario as they did in our text, particularly when it relates to our youth and the young of our church. In fact, beyond our church, to the young of our world. For there is an enemy who is bent on ambushing them. Everywhere you go, the world is getting there ahead of us. The challenge for the church is to get there before the enemy. If you've been in First Baptist for a long time, you know that we are in a precarious place when it comes to the next generation. There was a season when First Baptist was the go-to place for young people. But somehow along the way, we've lost traction, and we've lost the appeal, and we've lost that vigor and vitality that came with that demographic. So as we approach this year of dreaming again, this is one area that we need to dream again. With the past 3 years as a backdrop, the significance of this need to dream again with regard to the next generation is imperative. Church, we have to give it the attention it requires. You see, churches, not only First Baptist, are hemorrhaging young people, and this is not by accident. There is a relentless campaign by the enemy of our souls to remold our children in the image of the world. Every generation is tasked with passing on the faith of our fathers, and we must be cognizant that we are losing the war. In this technological generation that we are now in, it has been the defining influence on this generation. This generation, we had a meeting just last week with our men's ministry, and we were talking about how to reach this next generation. And we had almost 2-hour meeting discussing how do we impact this next generation. And one of the things that came out was that our young people are now living on their devices. They're living in an alternate world. They're living in a world that we did not grow up in. While I believe that it does play a significant role in their lives, all of us still need the human touch. But sometimes the door to a hearing comes by going to where they are. You know, we live in a serious time. Depression, anxiety in young people is high. Many people attribute it to social media. One researcher said that the like button is one of the most devastating inventions. Young kids are going on YouTube and TikTok and all those other things looking for likes. Likes from people they don't even know. Online bullying is incredible. Can you imagine this? And as an adult, I want to hear, as an adult, online bullying makes no sense to me. Because how can you bully me online? I control it. There's such a thing called block. There's such a thing called don't look at it. But guess what? Young people don't have that strength. Because they want to be liked. Because they want to know what people think about them. They become addicted not only to the positive, but to the negative. And so while I, as an adult, you can't bully me online because I'll shut you down in a second. You ain't gonna bully me. How do you bully me online? That makes no sense. In fact, you can't even bully me in person. Because young people taught me something. It's called talk to the hand. You can't bully me. How are you going to do? Unless you just jump on me and beat me up. Right? But young people haven't learned the skill set of how to resist the onslaught, how to say no. And so many of our young people are finding themselves drawn into these apps and these sites where their self-worth is being diminished and torn apart. But there's also another problem. We have a generation that knows not God because their parents don't know God. And in many instances, their grandparents don't know God. And so we're dealing with a generation of young people today who increasingly have no connection to God. They don't fear God. They don't have a respect for the church. They don't know. They never went to church. Their mothers and fathers never went to church. Their grandparents never went to church. And those of us of a certain generation, we go back, wait, when I was growing up. Listen, when you were growing up is a time past and gone. You can't come in and talk about, well, when I was growing up. Yes, when you were. Emphasis on were. We now have a generation that multiple generations have no connection to God. If you were to drive around this community from 40th Street to Columbus to Nebraska to MLK, if you were to drive in this area one day up and down these streets, it would blow your mind how many churches are in this area. But here's what I will guarantee you. The majority of the people don't go to church. Years ago, I created what I call the dream sheet for our church. Haven't used it in a long time. You know, stuff you come up with your nice ideas and you share them and then they go into the drawer and they never see the light of day. But on our dream sheet, there was one statement we made about our young people. And it goes like this. It says, we dream of an age-appropriate life development process that leads our children and youth to fall in love with the Lord for a lifetime, to commit themselves to the fellowship of the church, mature spiritually, discover their shape for ministry, and understand their life mission in the world. This ought to be the driving force of our church. That our goal is to have youth that fulfill these characteristics, youth that are engaged in this way. This ought to be the heartbeat of our church. In Matthew 22:37, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. I love that he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart. This past week I was introduced to a saying that in the race to the heart of the next generation, the first one there wins. In the race for the heart of the next generation, the first to get there wins. Disney, TikTok, Instagram. But young people don't go on Facebook. That's old people's app. Just in case you know, Facebook ain't no young people on Facebook. Facebook like the encyclopedia. That's like Encyclopedia Britannica. The music industry, hip hop and rap and Hollywood. The first to get there wins. And if we are to get there first, there's some adjustments that we need to make. And they're both substantive and they're also cosmetic, but we need to make some adjustments. And I can be here all day, so I'm just only cover two main areas. Number one, if we are going to see a shift, if we are going to get there first, we need to change our mindset with regards to abundance and scarcity. I said, Pastor, what in the world are you talking about? In order to get there first, we need to change our views regarding resources. For too long, we've been possessed by a scarcity mentality. You say, what is that? Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of an Effective Person, he says this, that scarcity mentality refers to people seeing life as a finite pie. Or these are the people that see the glass always half empty. So that if one person takes a big piece, that leaves less for everyone else. But most people, particularly in the corporate world, are conditioned to think in scarcity. If you get something, that means I get less. A scarcity mentality is what keeps many of us from achieving our goals because we don't see how we can succeed if somebody else does. But an abundance mindset refers to the paradigm that there is plenty out there for everybody. I want to give you an example of the difference between a scarcity and an abundance mentality. Go down any town or city in America, and this is something that's so crazy. Any town or city in America, you know in America because everything looks the same. Any town you go to, there's a McDonald's, there's a Walmart, there's a CVS, there's a Shell, there's a Panera Bread. Everybody, they're all the same. There's a Winn-Dixie. Everywhere you go, same things. But have you noticed that if someone puts up a CVS, across the street there's going to be a Walgreens? If you drive down the street and you see a Family Dollar, somewhere nearby there's a Dollar General. What am I saying? Whoever came in second didn't have a scarcity mentality, they had an abundance mentality. Because they figured if they can make it here, we can make it here too. But so often our mentality is a scarcity mentality, and we think in terms of what we can't do as opposed to what we can do. And the church has been infected with a scarcity mentality. Some of it is generationally. Some of it is culturally. Some of it is both cultural and generational. What do I mean by that? Well, in our context, for many of us, generationally, we're older. We grew up with very little. We didn't have much. And so our whole mindset has been shifted into this what? Scarcity mentality. I've got to grab and hold to everything I can get my hands on. I've got to hold it because guess what? Someone's going to what? Take it from me. So my mindset is one of scarcity. But also there's a personality effect here too, because there's some people are just generally abundance-minded, while others are timid, reserved, and hold on. It's not about how much money you have in life, it's just about your mindset towards it. Some of the most generous people in the world don't have a whole lot. Some of the stingiest people in the world have more than they need. And so the abundance mindset versus a mentality. So he said, Pastor, how does that relate to the church? Well, here's number one. Here's how it relates in relationship to money and our youth. What are we prepared to invest in this next generation? Or is it just lip service? When the call comes, are we prepared to do something to see the cause advanced? We say we want to reach them, but what are we prepared to do to reach them? been over a year now, I think, at least a year, and I'm going to throw out some stuff today. I don't know if this stuff is ever going to come to fruition, but I'm going to share with you just so you can begin to think about it. I went to one of the brothers. I said, listen, tell me something. What does it take to sponsor a Pee Wee football team? How much? I'm talking about money now. How much does it take to sponsor a team? They weren't sure. I said, you know what? You ever thought of maybe the church ought to sponsor a team? Here's why. During the season, you go out to any field, it's what? Littered with what? People. We want to reach people for Christ, but we want them to come here to this building on the corner where they don't even know what goes on in that strange, weird place, but we want to reach them. I want to suggest to you today that perhaps it's about time we start thinking abundance rather than scarcity. If you're going fishing, you don't come to the church. You go down to the docks, especially some of you guys in here. You all pay good money to go out 8 hours into the ocean to catch fish. And then you come home and you brag about it, or what you caught, what you didn't catch, whatever, right? You didn't say, we going fishing, let's go down to 3838 North 29th Street. You went where what? The fish are. What about chair groups? We ain't got to do all the crazy stuff. We can make sure our girls do stuff appropriately. But how about sponsoring the cheer team? Do you know how many young girls you could attract if you have a decent cheer team? And then you can share Jesus with these young people. Someone was saying the other day, well, how do we get them here? From my mouth to your ears. In the initial stage, I don't care if they come here. We've got to change our mindset. Reaching Christ, kids for Christ, does it mean a full choir stand, or does it mean us going where the fish are? Rather than being a tool, our resources become our safety blanket. When we get to heaven, God's not going to ask us, how much did you leave in the church's bank account? The church is going to say, how did you use my resources for the kingdom? That's what he's going to say. That's what he's going to say. But I got to get on. Number 2, time. What about your time? Let's follow my suggestion. What if we were to sponsor a team? If we sponsor a team, what does that mean? That means someone's got to coach it. Someone's got to manage it. What does that take? Time. And what I'm sharing with you today is something that's not that I like going home and putting my feet up and hanging out and drinking some coffee. And I enjoy that. I am 62 years old. I don't like being out in nobody's hot sun on a Saturday morning. I'm just going to be honest with you. Be on nobody's field. But guess what? There may be someone in here, you've been dying to be a coach, but nobody has given you a chance. And what I'm doing, here's what I'm doing, folks. I don't know if this will ever materialize, but here's what I'm doing. I am allowing you to see inside the mind of the pastor. So we shake off the old clothes and we say, listen, we have to see. You can't fish on land. You got to fish in the ocean, in the water, in the river, in the stream. You can't throw your net in the pew. And so we've got to rethink how we do youth ministry. Youth ministry has to take us into the school system. You know what I learned this last week? I didn't even know that you could sign up just to volunteer to be a volunteer in Hillsborough County school system. I didn't even know that. You want to impact some young person's life? This week, I'm getting into the process. This week, I'm signing up. The race to the heart of the next generation, the first to get there wins. How about you? We can beat our gums up all day sitting around having conferences and conclaves and talking about where the young people are and why they're not here. Well, they're not here, so what are we going to do about it? You think these kids are interested in just them singing in a choir? If they were, they'd be here. Okay, I'm way past time. Number 3, and it connects to the second one, but your talent. What are you passing on to these young people? In the church, we especially in the past, we would just bifurcate everything so much, you know. We bifurcate stuff. I will. Should I take? No. Let me leave that alone. Here's what happens. I am not saying that young people or kids, but age appropriately, we ought to be bringing our young people along, sharing our talent with them that they can learn themselves. And that brings us to the second point about legacy building. What are we leaving as a testament to our passing this way? When you're off the scene, what will be said about you? Here's what I want us to do. I want us to begin bringing young people along. What does that mean? I want to commend Dr. Matthews for giving space to some young people to begin working in the sound booth. These kids know more about technology than you will ever know. But often we tell them, you're too young, you can't do this. But we need to make space for young people. I'm not just talking about the itty-bitty ones. I'm talking, for those of us that are old, I'm talking about young adults. Often in the church, young adults who are able to manage businesses, and they're middle managers and supervisors on their jobs. They come to the church and we tell them the only thing you're good for, you fill in the blank. These are the same people that are knocking the ball out of the park 5 days a week. They're supervising 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 people on their jobs, even more. And they come to church and we tell them, well, you can't do that because you ain't been here long enough. The race to the heart of the next generation. In the race to the heart of the next generation, the first to get there wins. We need to hand off responsibility. It's amazing when you give it to them and they do it and you're like, wow, aren't they gifted and talented? Make room for the next generation because God already has. Look at Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, verse 16 through 17. But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions. See, God is already there. We just need to catch up. We need to catch up. So while we're comforted in our conditions here, we need to realize that. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthian Christians about the seasons of ministry. And I liken ministry to like farming, the church to like farming, because farming is dependent on seasons. In 1 Corinthians 3:6, he says, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. And so seasons matter. And so here's where we are. I'm almost done, but we need to talk about this for just a second. Seasons are important. Seasons matter. If you are a planter, you know that there is a farmer, there's a planting season. Some people call it a sowing season, where you put the seeds in the ground. In this season, we're depositing the values and beliefs of our faith into the soil. And so every church, every individual, we ought to be about the business of planting seeds. And that's why Paul could say, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. We need to be planting seeds that will one day reap a harvest of the next generation. And so there's the planting season where we're out planting the seeds. And let's go back to my illustration that I gave earlier. If we went out and just say we had, first, I don't even want to call it First Baptist, but anyway, for the sake, First Baptist warriors. We know that the majority of those kids are not going to be, quote unquote, saved. And every meeting we have, we're not going to beat them on the head. We're not going to have a church service every practice. But we could have a prayer, and we could have a little devotional as we begin to, what? Plant the seeds. And once the seeds have been planted, then we've got to go to the next season. That's the season of watering. The season of watering. I have some trees in my yard that we couldn't seem to get a handle on them growing, and I had my sprinkler trying to get them, and finally I figured out, you know what, I could put in a drip system myself. Went and got all the tools, all the materials put together, and put together a drip system. And once the drip system was in, it was amazing how those trees just begin to get life, and they begin to flourish, and they begin to grow. And the wonderful thing about it is I didn't have to go out there doing no watering, because it was all automatic timer, just, right? But what? They were planted, but they weren't doing well. They needed to be watered. And so the watering season comes in. It's the season of caretaking. It's the season of pruning. It's the season of weeding. It's the season of grafting. It's that season where we're taking those young people that we're working with and we're pouring into their lives, seeing them nurture, grow, and mature. And then there's the third season. That's the season of harvest. Can I take you back just a little bit? We saw our harvest. Years ago when we were packed and filled, that was harvest season. But everyone knows that harvest season comes but once a year. You got to go back the next year and you got to do what? Do the process all over again. I live right in the middle of strawberry fields. And I watch the cycle happen every single year. And you can time it. We only got a couple more weeks left in harvest. Once you see the fair come up, by the time the strawberry festival is over, you go out to Dover and you see brown fields. They go in and they kill off all the plants because the harvest is what? Over. And here's what they do. They take off all those black plastic tops and they put them to the side, some they burn them, and then they plant some seeds that spring up and they just kind of grow. They're nothing. Sometimes they're what do you call them? Sunflower seeds, whatever. Sometimes they put onions in them or different things, and they just kind of let it sit. And that grows and grows and grows, and life goes on. And round about September, you see activity again. Tractor comes in and they clear it down. Next thing, you come back the next day and they've got the rows furrowed. And that sits for a bit, and then you see them, they get the sprinklers and they start wetting the ground. And so you know what's coming, right? And then one day you go to work and come back, and you come back and the field is all planted out. And then over the next several months, it's just watered and watered. And then you come back again and you see a bunch of guys in the field picking. What happened? They went from planting to watering to harvesting. If you ask me where we are right now in relation to the next generation in our church, folks, it's planting time. It's planting time. We need to plant. If we are going to see a harvest, we need to plant. Now, maybe we don't have, quote unquote, the resources on hand, but we may need some of you to step up. Those that have a heart of generosity, to step up and say, even above and beyond what we have in our operating budget, we want to create a fund that we could do some of this stuff over and beyond what it takes just to keep the lights on and keep people engaged. And as I say that, there are two sets of people that look at me. One set of people look at me and they say, "Hey, there you go again. I know this is coming down to money." Okay, your scarcity mindset, you need to check out, close your eyes, go to sleep for the next couple of minutes. I ain't talking to you. I'm not talking to you. But there's another group in here that's the abundance mindset, and they're saying, wow, how can I be a part of that? How can I get on board with that? And those are the people that we need if we're going to move the needle, if we're going to make this thing happen. We need some folk with an abundance mindset that say, I may not have $1 million to throw into this, but I've got some time. I got some talent. I have some ability. And I'm willing to invest what I have in order to see the vision come to pass. Folks, we've got to stop thinking about who is coming. We need to start thinking about who we're going to. And I just gave that one example. There's so many other things that we could do outside of trying to get them here on a Sunday morning. Listen, we can get them here, but we got to first catch them. How many of you have ever ridden down the road and saw a sign on a church and decided just because you saw the sign, you're going to that church? I think I may be the only one that did that. But I was on a mission. And I saw First Baptist Church of College Hill, and every city I've been to, First Baptist churches are always the best in town. So I figured I'm going to go there. And that's how I got here. But I don't necessarily respond to church advertisements. You don't either. You belong to a church. You're a part of a church. You don't. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Can you imagine the person who has no interest in God? They're not looking at your signs. They're not coming because it was a cute sign on the marquee. Sometimes I think our signs drive people away rather than bringing them in. Get right or burn in hell. Why am I going to go in there? I told Kamala, I said, listen, what we put up there, let's be careful. Because we may be repelling people rather than attracting people. But we know that's how we get in our own bubble. We think it's all safe in our little bubble. And we insult the unsaved and say all kind of nasty things to them about the unsaved. Something about smoke, you're going to smoke up hell. All kinds of crazy stuff. And then we wonder why people don't come. Okay, folks, I've been way, way longer than I needed to be today. But here's where we bring it together. Are you a sower? Are you a waterer? Are you a harvester? Corporately, we can be one, and individually, you can be another. There may be somebody in your life right now that you're watering. You're watering their life. You're pruning their life. You're pouring into them. Maybe you're in a place now where you're seeing the harvest of your labor. Maybe you're seeing the harvest of your labor. I want to give you an example. I spent a couple of days this week at a conference. And as a part of the conference, a group from Freeport came, Freeport, Bahamas. The leader of the group, the pastor of the group, is Reverend Kyle Maycock. Kyle's mother and I went to school together, high school. Kyle was a part of the youth group when I was the youth pastor in Freeport. At some point, Kyle began to feel a call of God for ministry. And as some of you know, many of you know, at that time, my friend, Pastor Wilbur Outen, was the senior pastor of the church, and we were, inseparable. And so all of that was talked. We talked about Kyle often. And eventually, Kyle came and went to Trinity College in in Newport Richey. During his term in Newport Richey, some of those of you that were here remember Kyle came and was an intern with me in the youth department here at our church. After Kyle left here, he went home, and Kyle went to a little community, we'd call it in the sticks here in America, a little community on a little island with very little activity for 2 years. Served as a leader down there and led a church. Eventually, he relocated back to his home church in Freeport. And on the passing of Reverend Outen, when he died in 2017, the church called Kyle to become the pastor of that church. The church is an awesome young church, filled with young, excited people that are following after the Lord. And as I met this week and we were together in that conference, my heart was so full. Because what I experienced in that moment was harvest. What I experienced was a result of the planting. What I experienced was a result of the watering. Kyle brought with him 5 other people that were leaders in his church to be a part of the conference. And what Kyle was doing in that moment was Kyle was watering. What am I saying? I'm saying that we individually have to understand that God has given us a season, and I don't know what season you're in. Are you in a planting season? Are you in a watering season? Are you in a harvesting season? You don't have to be the pastor to do that. Is there somebody that God has brought into your life that you can pour into? Paul says the same thing that thou hast heard of me, commit thou to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. Every one of us ought to be discipling. Every one of us ought to have influence in the life of somebody. Find that person and say, God, they may not even know I'm discipling them, but I'm going to do it anyhow. I'm going to speak life into them. I'm going to share God with them. I'm going to be good for them. I'm going to be a listening ear for them. I'm going to be an example of Christ for them. I am going to be that. And I want to suggest that you find someone of the next generation that needs it. Folks, it could be your own child. Your grandkids. Be that to them. But folks, what we want to do is we want to lift our eyes unto the fields, for they are white unto harvest. If we're going to reach this next generation, we've got to get there first. We've got to get there first. And so I want you to begin dreaming, folks. I want you to ask God to help you to dream again. You may come and say, Pastor, here's an idea. We may be inundated with ideas, but you know what? We just need for a good one to surface. All ideas may not make it past the cutting floor, but at least we've got something to work with. Would you join me on this journey? Would you join me? I see a church with young people that are committed and dedicated to God. I see a church with individuals grown that are surrendered to Him, whose lives are given over to God. We often sing this hymn in relation to salvation, but I want to sing this in relation to your service today. So I want you to stand with me, and we're going to sing the song, I Surrender All. There may be somebody today that wants to surrender to service. Maybe God has touched your life in a way and you want to be surrendered to service. I want to give you an opportunity to surrender to Him today.
Thank you for watching First Baptist Church of College Hill online. I hope today's worship experience blessed you and would help you develop a closer relationship with Jesus Christ. We want to stay connected with you and help you on your Christian journey. So if you're a guest, be sure to complete the connection card in the description. Join us for live online services every Sunday, and visit our website, FBCCH.org, to find out all of the latest news and events happening here at FBCCH. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything happening here at the Hill. And share this with a friend so it can bless them as well. Thank you again for watching. God bless you.